You're all set. Have a good meeting.
Thanks so much. All right. The Scituate School Committee is committed to providing an environment of respect during meetings. We ask all members to interact in a polite manner, even when there is disagreement. We value the participation of our community and want all participants, including marginalized and minoritized communities, to feel welcomed and respected. We ask our committee members and all who participate to commit to these standards to support and respect our community. We'll call the March 25th, 2024 Scituate School Committee meeting to order via roll call vote. Gates.
Yes.
Lindblom.
Yes.
Borkowski.
Yes.
Fenwick.
Yes.
And Delaney, yes. All right. We will begin with public comment. Nobody in person and not seeing any virtually. All right. Let's go forward to our student report. Louisa Kinsley and David Murphy. I see David is remote.
No, he's here.
I'm here.
How are you
I know,
online too?
Mom and Dad,
I've been gone for a little while, but I'm back.
you're on there.
You have a twin person on
What?
the
Namesake?
computer.
Oh, you know who that? That's probably my my mom, my
Oh,
parents.
hi,
and my
David's
dad.
mom.
Hey mom,
Just
what's
gotta
up?
check the Zoom
This thing,
safety
this thing
these
isn't even
days.
on. It's not even on. It's funny.
We're really scanning that Zoom.
Hey mom, how you doing?
Good
Thanks
job,
for watching.
fan.
Oh, look at.
Oh, she switched it. All right. Well, it's been a while, but I'm back. So I guess it's time to get started. So to start with our winter sports updates. So the SHS cheerleading team competed in the America Cheer International Cheer Competition last weekend. And we are proud to announce that SHS has itself some national champions. They came in first place in their section, which is absolutely crazy and an amazing accomplishment. So great job to them. And some even more outstanding news, Scituate also has a few Boston Herald All-Scholastic team members, Michael Porter for basketball and James Sullivan for hockey. So congratulations to these athletes for this great honor as well. And in more news, spring sports are finally underway with many student athletes participating. So I'm sure all this good news on the athletic front will continue coming in. So moving away from sports, on Thursday, March 14th, SHS partnered with Gates to hold a STEM event showcase. Here, teachers and students displayed their work for the community to see a very engaging event. SHS art students also had some of their work displayed at the Front Street Gallery. Paintings and drawings were on display for about 2 weeks. An MCAS rally was held in the PAC during Wind Block on Thursday, March 21st. The administration provided our sophomore students with ways to prepare for the exam. A slideshow was presented and handouts were given for the sophomore students to take home to their families. Believe me, from personal experience, MCAS can always be a bit of a drag, so I'm sure this is very helpful for students and their families. The robotics team also completed at BWSU on Saturday, March 9th, and Sunday, March 10th, just barely falling short of the finals after competing all the way through to the semifinal bouts. So congratulations to them for their run. Additionally, 3 SHS students have been selected to participate in the Massachusetts Music Educators Association All-State Music Festival. They are Matthew Short playing the trumpet, Scarlett Hickman playing, well, her voice, and Micaiah Joan Whitaker also singing like Scarlett. So congratulations to these SHS students on their selections. Model UN had an exciting week at the Berkeley Model UN Conference in California. Scituate students got a chance to explore San Francisco and the surrounding area and participated in one of the largest Model UN conferences in the country. And when I say we explored San Francisco, I mean we looked in every nook and cranny of that city. I think we averaged about 7 to 10 miles of walking a day, so my feet were hurting pretty bad by the end, but it was awesome. And as someone who attended, my only complaint was recovery from the 3-hour time zone switch, which admittedly was also pretty rough. Still, even with the destroyed sleep schedule, the trip was absolutely amazing, and I loved going, and I'm sure all the other students did too. So during the actual Model UN conference, the following students were recognized for their accomplishments. Research awards were given to juniors Leah Brennan, Allison McGurdy, and Noah Shepard, and senior David Murphy. Freshman Maeve Lynch and sophomore Mason Alvarez were recognized for their outstanding contributions playing the role of North Korea in the UN Human Rights Council, which I think given their country and committee must have been quite the experience. And finally, junior Allison McGurdy was awarded the Outstanding Delegate Award for her role as the United States in the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, an extremely prestigious award, especially at a conference as difficult as Berkeley Model UN. So congratulations to her as well. So with that said, I'll hand things over to Louisa to finish things off.
The DECA State Business and Marketing Competition recently took place at the Marriott Copley in Boston over 3 days with close to 4,000 students competing statewide. Our Scituate High School business students were well represented with 31 participants. The following 3 students were DECA State finalists: Cooper McDonald, Parker Hausman, and Parker Shaw. And congratulations to Bailey Young, Savannah Garabedian, and Will Hine, who are DECA State champions and will be moving on to the international competition in April in Anaheim, California. Principal Ranger met with student leadership last week to fill out a survey on what SHS has done well so far this year and what we can improve on next year. Administration reported that the students provided some great ideas for the future and they'll work to implement them in the coming years. And next I have some news from guidance. As the course selection process wraps up, 9th to 11th grade students were given the opportunity to meet individually with their school counselor to finalize their course selections for next year. Counselors were appreciative of the class time to meet with students. And Mrs. Rundle held an AP meeting during Wind Block today to go over the AP test exam schedule. All students present at school who are taking AP courses were in attendance. We were very excited because Mr. Loranger got t-shirts for all the students currently enrolled in AP classes and is hosting an AP breakfast for students and families next Wednesday before school. AP preparation season is now in full swing, and many students in AP classes have been able to take AP mock exams through Mass Insight on certain delayed start Wednesdays, which are great to prepare for the real exam and act as a progress check to understand what else we need to learn or review before the exams in May. So that's all we have today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Love you, Mom.
All right. Leadership report, Superintendent Burkett.
Thank you, Ms. Brandolini. Before I get to the new school presentation tonight and introducing our guests, I do want to have a statement for the community regarding an incident that occurred last week during our public forum for the new school. Dear members of the Scituate community, I am sorry to report that a public meeting of the Scituate School Building Committee was disrupted on Thursday night by a Zoom bombing, as it is commonly known. The meeting, which was open to the public, both in person and online, was infiltrated by someone who exposed himself on camera. Unfortunately, this type of cyber attack has occurred in communities across the country over the past several years, since the launch of remote and hybrid meetings. The Scituate Police Department is now involved in this matter, and we are actively involved investigating both the breach, how it occurred, and the offender, and identifying that offender. Zoom has also helped out, and we'll be working with our local police to identify the culprit. And at the same time, we've been working since Thursday night, over the weekend into today, with our technology department to strengthen our protocols for remote participation that will minimize the risk of this behavior in the future. I'm confident tonight that we have some of those applications in place. And again, just apologize for those folks that were on the call for having to endure that. And want to let folks know that we have done everything under our power to identify the perpetrator, but also to make things safe and comfortable for our guests at our meetings. So I'll take any questions if you have.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome our guests that you've seen before, our Vertex OPM member, John Lemieux, and our Doran Whittier. So for tonight is Don Walter. I'm going to, before I turn it over to Don and John, I'd like to show a video that we put together that kind of encapsulates the school project. It's hot off the press. We aired it Thursday in the premiere. We showed it this afternoon, and now I'd like to show the community tonight. We'll share that out tomorrow in our follow-up and school committee notes. That'll be available online on our website. It is lengthy. It's about 8 minutes. What I'll also be doing is sharing 2-minute clips of this because 8 minutes is a long time to share with everybody, but I think it's important we share the whole thing tonight. These will be broken down into segments that I'll be sharing over the next weeks up into the vote, educating the folks on the project and the voting process. Okay? Okay. Any reason why we can't hear?
So I'll tell you what, Superintendent Burkett, let's stop sharing let's do that. And now I want you to go share again before you actually do. In that bottom left-hand corner of what you're sharing, you'll see an option that says share audio sound too. So click the share, what you want to.
Share sounds.
Yes, and you can turn your volume off on your computer if that is your computer giving us that feedback, because we'll hear it. Let's try that.
Scituate Public Schools embarked on the MSBA process in May 2020 to meet the needs of the aging elementary schools in our district. After exhaustive work by our community, we proposed a new elementary school be built to consolidate Cushing and Hatherley schools and provide more capacity for pre-K. The Massachusetts School Building Authority accepted our proposal. MSBA is a state agency that accepts a limited number of applications through a highly competitive process each year to provide grants for the construction and renovation of public schools. By entering this process, Scituate stands to receive up to $35.8 million in state money to help pay for the new school's construction. That money reduces the cost to Scituate's taxpayers. For the past 16 months, we've updated our community on the feasibility study, preliminary design, and schematics of our plan. We're now at the project scope and budget approval phase of this project. In this video, we'll explain why our district needs to construct a new elementary school. We'll share how the proposed design of the new elementary school meets these needs. We'll lay out our plan for consolidating the two schools in a way that's least disruptive to our community and our students. We will provide detailed numbers on what the project will cost, what Scituate's share of the expense is, how we plan to finance this expense, and the impact it will have on our tax assessments. And we will explain what a yes and no vote mean for the project, which our district will present to our town's voters for approval at a special town meeting on April 29th and on the town election ballot on May 18th. Our district leaders sought MSBA funding for a new elementary school because both Hatherley and Cushing have reached the end of their useful lives. Here's how. Hatherley, opened in 1962, was identified by the MSBA as having the greatest needs of any of the elementary schools. Cushing is just 2 years younger, opened in 1964. They both have deficient site conditions with poor pavement, vehicle circulation, and drainage, deteriorating exteriors, including poor insulation, rotting windows, and leaky roofs, decaying 20-year-old modular classrooms which were meant to be temporary solutions, and aging interiors that are not fully accessible. Both schools would require total replacement or significant upgrades to basic systems like heating, ventilation, and electrical to remain in operation. Even with upgrades and repairs, neither Cushing nor Hatherley have the capacity to deliver the type of programming that grants our children an excellent educational experience for the next 60 years. That's central to how we've designed a single new school. We started with community input, an intensive visioning process with community members, parents, students, administrators, and teachers to imagine an innovative design that includes varied and flexible learning environments and avoids the antiquated one-size-fits-all model. This will serve a multi-tiered system of supports and students with diverse and individual needs. We stayed true to our strategic plan, creating a universal design for learning in our physical space with traditional classroom spaces and flexible breakout spaces. We also designed with the entire community in mind, a fully accessible space zoned into private and public spaces, improved Flannery Field, substantial gym space, and fully accessible playground, all with easy access and ample parking. We tied the indoor and outdoor spaces together with connections into 2 courtyards that will be used for developmentally appropriate learning. And we prioritized safety and our footprint on the neighborhood with separate secure entrances for pre-K and the elementary school, private and public zones in the building, and a traffic flow that will reduce impact in the surrounding neighborhood. By constructing a single new elementary school for 460 Cushing and Hatherley students and new space for 100 pre-K students, Scituate can take 2 aging buildings offline. Our goal to consolidate and redistrict 2 schools will be to smoothly acclimate children, families, teachers, and staff to the new building with minimal disruption. Here are the guiding principles we will follow while consolidating and redistricting Scituate for a new elementary school. We commit to an inclusive process, providing an opportunity for every voice to be heard through a series of community conversations about the redistricting process. Our goal is to minimize the social and emotional impact on our children, prioritizing keeping families together at one school. Should voters approve the plan to build a new elementary school, the discussion of the redistricting process will take place as early as fall 2024 to prepare for the opening of the school in fall 2027. Here's the project scope and budget for a new elementary school under the MSBA process. The total project budget is $119.4 million. This includes careful contingency planning for rising costs, demolition of the Cushing School, and infrastructure improvements. The MSBA would contribute up to $35.8 million to this budget, leaving about $83.6 million for Scituate to finance. You'll see that this number is very close to the cost that was estimated by our design team at the preferred schematic phase of this process last October. Here's how we propose to pay for it. A 25-year bond structured in a manner to save millions of dollars of interest over the life of repayment by paying equal amounts of principal each year. Using a conservative interest rate of 4.75%, that amounts to $866 of additional property taxes in the first year of repayment on a $921,000 home, the average single-family assessed home in Scituate. By year 25 of repayment, that tax impact is declined to $414 of additional taxes on the same valued home. We're presenting this financing to voters as a debt exclusion, meaning the tax increase is temporary. The tax amount declines each year and expires when the bond is repaid. This project scope and budget now requires action by voters. This will take place on 2 key dates. At a special town meeting on April 29th, the project requires a 2/3 majority of town meeting attendees to approve. The project also appears as a ballot question at the town's election on May 18th and requires a simple majority of voters to move forward. The project must achieve a positive result at both the special town meeting and the ballot in order to move forward. If voters approve the project in the town election, the MSBA project team would move forward with final design of a new elementary school, then construction, with the goal of cutting the ribbon and occupying the new school in fall of 2027. If voters do not approve the project, Scituate Public Schools will need to address the repair and improvement of Cushing and Hatherley Elementary Schools through its regular capital improvement process. The MSBA's involvement would cease, and any future MSBA involvement on a future project would require the filing of a new statement of interest by the town. The cost of maintaining these 2 buildings would continue to rise and would require Scituate to divert maintenance money from other buildings. Renovation of the existing buildings for mechanical systems, structural needs, and current accessibility code requirements has a number of differences from the current MSBA process. 100% of these expenses would likely have to be paid with local tax dollars, as the educational needs of the district are not being met by this method. We estimate these expenses at $62 million in 2024 dollars, but we can only forecast the actual cost over the 6-year timeline we estimate the renovations would take. We believe the actual cost, by the time renovations would be completed in 2032, would be similar to Scituate's contribution toward a new elementary school under MSBA. Renovation would also take significantly longer, as the improvements would have to be made in phases using modular space, which would disrupt student learning. Nor would it solve any of the critical education space challenges present in both buildings or add needed pre-K capacity. The MSBA process is challenging, but we believe is the best way to achieve our mission of inspiring, supporting, and challenging all learners to reach their unique potential. Please take a moment to review more of the design plans, project renderings, and budget numbers of this project in the MSBA section of the Scituate Public Schools website.
Now I'm going to share the presentation, but while I'm transitioning over, if anybody has any questions that we might address.
I thought that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think it was really good. I feel like it's much different than anything that we've provided before. I think it was professional, efficient, technologically advanced, and very clear in its message. So I think it was really well done.
Thank you.
I don't know how we did that. I think it was, for me, it hit all the high points and it was very clear.
And I can address that, Mr. Gates. I think
Those
through a lot of these presentations, we've learned a lot. But honestly, it's been certainly a team effort. But we used a professional, obviously, the voiceover, although I think my voice would have been just as good. I think that was excellent. But we had a script, and the gentleman here and our team and Brandolini, there was several edits to it, and that was a few, 2-3 weeks just working on the script. And the pictures and all the uploads. So it was over a month-long process to get to that. So it was a lot of work and a lot of edits, and we've even edited up until this week. And so yeah, we're very proud of it, and thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I'm hoping that a person just watching this can gain a lot from it.
Do you think that you'll show that at town meeting? Is that what the intent is?
Yes.
Okay.
We can share it, like you want us to now go forth with this.
Oh
Or
yeah.
you, I
We
know
won't
you're
wait
gonna
just
share
to do
it
that.
on
No,
the-
we take
I'm
Take
like,
the link and press.
are we ready? But you're gonna set it out with.
Oh yeah, we won't wait to.
Your plan is at blast.
So
Do the
tomorrow or the next day when we do the school committee follow-up, that'll be actually, I'm probably gonna do it separate.
Yeah.
Just to keep it separate, get it out to everybody with the whole, and then we'll go piece by piece after that. So get this out to everybody this week with a little narrative, and then do the sections as I break it down. We'll start whole and go piece. And then it'll be available, and then, folks can share it and get it out there, because it's, this is a kind of a summary of everything, and then we'll send out some more detail. And hopefully that will garner knowledge, but also more questions and feedback, so that we had everyone's questions answered and concerns, if there are, or excitement addressed before the 29th is the goal.
Can you send it out through the text communication too?
I think so. We'll link,
Okay.
like we've done with other videos, we'll link it back like an app post to the website, which they can play it. We're gonna try to get there's other versions that this gentleman that Dave Cartoonen, who created this, there's different versions you can post on Instagram, and there's other things that he's helping us with actually to share out those mods. All right, I'm gonna try to share my screen again for the presentation for Don and John. Take over the.
That's less than 8 minutes.
Yeah.
A lot less technology on this one too. Thank you for having us again tonight. We're gonna do a quick schedule update, and John's gonna get into a little more detail as it relates to budget and cost on the project. But I know you've seen these schedules before, but as a way of update, the overall schedule you're seeing on the screen now, we've actually made it bigger by going backwards. I think it's important that people understand that this didn't just start in 2022 when John and I were hired, Vertex and Norm Whittier, but it actually started back in 2017 with the elementary school study, master plan study that was done. And really out of that study came the recommendations to do the work that we're doing now, because to get MSBA involved. So in both 2019 and 2020, what's called statements of interest were submitted to the MSBA. The first time not accepted, the second time the town, the Hatherley project was accepted into what they call the eligibility phase, which allowed the town to organize, put the school building committee together, finance the feasibility study schematic design up front over the 2021 into 2022, when we both got hired the middle and the end of the year. So right now we're about 16 months into the remaining 5 years of what is a 10-year process when you look at the overall schedule. And we've gone through the feasibility study phase. We finished the schematic design phase, which we've submitted to the MSBA. And then the anticipation with a favorable votes here in the spring, we go through about a 15-month design and bidding phase, and then about 18 months of construction, which allows the school to be opened in the fall of 27. So looking at the detail, again, this has all been presented before, but you can see with the red dashed line as we moved through the initial preliminary design program, which were the many options, to the preferred schematic report, which were the few options, down to the one option, preferred option, which is the schematic design, which has been submitted. I think what's really important throughout this entire process, we've done, as a group, I think, a great job of informing the public, right? We just had our 8th public meeting last week, on top of the school building committee meetings that we've held, on top of the school committee meetings we've held. We've met with finance, capital planning, select board, met with the butters. So really, the overall SBC school department, Superintendent Burkhead, Ms. Brenda Leedy done a great job of trying to inform the public as to what this project is and what it's going to be and what the impacts are going to be on the community. So on the 24th of April, right, will be, I think I got that date ingrained in my brain. That'll be the MSBA board meeting, which is very important. We work very closely with them throughout, and we would fully expect them to support this project and vote it through, which will allow for the April 28th special town meeting and then the May 18th special election, annual election, this being on the ballot. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to John to talk a little bit more about the budget and the financing.
Thanks, Don. So the video does a great job of kind of boiling it down to some quick bites, and the purpose of these slides is to kind of show you a little bit of how the sausage was made, so that you can understand that, what went into those final numbers. So you heard the discussion on the video about the preferred schematic. We were at 120.1 million, and at the end of SD, we were at 119.4, which is great, but it didn't come without a little bit of heartburn and some additional requests. So basically, when Don's team got the schematic design done, we sent that out, and we had it estimated by 2 sets of cost estimators, theirs and ours, and then they sat together and they reconciled it. Unfortunately, when the cost estimate came back, we were high, and the total project budget wasn't 120.1, it was 124.3. So we realized that there was still some work to do. Don and his team did yeoman's work at identifying some items to really get the cost down. Superintendent was committed to that 120.1, and we also needed to add back in the feasibility study, because that's on the budget. That's the 1.1 that you already approved. We also wanted to add in there the Cushing demo and abatement, and we also wanted to add in the potential for the Ann Vinyl sewer work out on the main road. So what did that require? That required us going through and doing some value management and looking at 5 particular areas: site, structure, envelope, the interior, and MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And what you can see under that deducted slide or deducted column is really the result of going through and saying, where can we save money on this design? Because understand too, when the preferred schematic is submitted, it's really a 30,000 foot view of the project, right? It doesn't really have a design yet. It's done very high level, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second. But when you get to the schematic level, you're actually looking at drawings with contours and elevations and all of those things. And when the estimators look at it, and that's why we do it early and we do it multiple times throughout the duration of the project, because we want to know how does the bidding public see this. So what came out of those value discussions were, for the site, we said, we've got to do some grading changes. We carried, instead of the turf field, we carried a grass field for Flannery. We also made some changes to materials to the tune of about $2.6 million. For the structure, we simplified the main entry, that big covered roof the cantilevers out. During what you suggested, let's make it a little smaller. That means that the overhang is a little less, but the steel members that, don't need to be as tall if they're not hanging out as far. That with a change with the roof after talking with Kelly said, you know what, I don't need a full stairwell to the roof. Let's just do a ladder. Those two changes were about $1 million. The envelope, we had a little bit more glass. We had more metal panel. Gordon Whittier said, you know what, we can reduce the amount of glass. We can increase the amount of brick. Those changes resulted in almost another couple of $1 million. Some flooring changes and some finishes inside netted another 100,000. But probably one of the other biggest changes was saying, you know what, we're not going to move ahead with a geothermal heating system. We're going to move ahead with a dual fuel system. And the baseline system was an all electric building, but not geothermal. And moving back to a dual fuel system was a savings of 2.6 million. Team looked at the soft costs, we're also able to save about 870,000. So all of those deductions took that 124 down. And then we were able to add in the feasibility, the Cushing demo, and the vinyl force main, and get us to that 119.4 SD. Next slide. And you can see the summary of that right here. So on the left is how the breakdown looked for the project at PSR, preferred schematic. We had a $92 million construction budget. We had soft costs calculated at 30% of the budget, because again, they weren't itemized at that point. They were just a percentage. That was 120.1. We showed a grant that averaged about 28% back after calculating cost caps and those sorts of things with MSBA. So we had a town share of 86.4 million. Well, on the right is where we ended up at after SD. So again, the result of those budgets and the value management got us to 94.9 million. Soft costs ended up running at 25.8% of construction, not 30. So that includes all of the architect, OPM, contingencies, furniture, fixture, equipment, technology. When we priced it all out, we were able to get that number down to 25.8%. So the total project budget was the 119.4. The grant from the MSBA, after calculating it, and then actually having our project scope and budget call with the MSBA last week, had a final grant amount, maximum grant amount of the 35.8 million that you heard in the video, which results in a town share of 83.6 million. Next slide, please. So we then, Nancy Holt's been great with these numbers. These next two slides come directly from her. You can see our project budget again of the 119.4 and the town share of 82,520. And you say, well, wait a minute, you just told me it was 83,620. That difference is 1.1 million that you already voted and borrowed to do the feasibility study. Okay, so ultimately the MSBA still tracks it all together as one project, but the net is what you need to borrow. So the 82,520, 663, and then Nancy ran the calculations of what that meant for the average home price of 921,000, using the 4.75% borrowing rate. If Nancy were here, she would tell you that if we were borrowing that today, that number would be between 3.75 and 4%, not 4 3/4. 4 3/4 is a conservative number, so keeping it a little bit higher. We'll show you that in just a second. So again, that results in the first year payment of $866 for that average home price, and the 25th year payment of $414, or a total to the taxpayer of $15,988. Next slide. Nancy also produced this table. Obviously, the single biggest impact to the taxpayer is what borrowing rate we can get. So if you look at that average home with the yellow bar, and you see the 866 calculated, that could drop $100 if the rate is a percentage point less. So again, Nancy will have we'll have these handouts ready to hand out to folks. Next. So just a little more on the yes vote and the no vote. Just as the video said, the yes vote is simple. A yes vote, the project votes, gets the 2 positive votes. It continues along the timeline that Don showed you at the beginning, and we move through to bidding of the 13 months worth of design, a couple months of bidding, basically shovels in the ground in the basically September of '25, with cutting the ribbon, again, 2 years later. A no vote. No vote is basically, it stops the project. Again, folks have asked about a MSBA's failed vote policy. MSBA's failed vote policy is really just a way for the town to be granted more time. Once the MSBA approves the project on April 24th, the town has 120 days to prove to the MSBA that they support it, and that's through the passage of the 2 votes. They'll give you more time. If, let's say, you were to miss by a few votes, and you would say, well, what do? Well, we have to have another town meeting. We have to do a little more education. That's what the failed vote policy is for. It's not for a quote unquote plan B. And again, all the other items, as they said, that was stated in the video, if there's a no vote, you have to reapply for the MSBA if you want to be considered in the future. Repair costs will now have to be dealt with through the ongoing yearly budgeting. Excellent. Take next step. Sure.
So, next steps. Our public forum number 9, it's going to be 6:30 p.m. in the Senior Center. So, hope to see people come out. And I must say that the forums have really been, for the most part, very well attended. We've had great discussion. We've had great ideas that people have shared with us. So that's been very heartening. As I mentioned, the MSBA board meeting is April 24th. That's at 10 a.m. That is actually a public meeting. It's all remote. And then we have the special town meeting on April 29th at the high school. The election on May 18th, also at the high school, both in the gymnasium. And I should say, note that the annual town meeting is still April 8th. So this is a special on the 29th just for this project. So April 8th will be the annual town meeting. And then lastly, any questions that people may have, any information you may be searching for, all the work that's been done is available. If you go to sit.org, click on this icon, and you will find all the information that's been developed. You can also go on the town's website on scituatema.gov. So there you have it. Thank you. Questions?
No, I think that this presentation also was very helpful and summative and very clear in terms of where we've been and where we are and where we're going. So I appreciate it. It's great. I know I've asked, I had 2 comments. One is, I know I bring this up every time, but that Flannery field, I know you had mentioned that we're not going to we're going to do grass. Just have to remember that we can't irrigate, so that's going to come up.
Yes, no, it's a great point, and the building committee has talked about it.
Okay.
That's one of those things that once the project continues down the road, right, steel comes out of the ground, if the building committee says that's the most important first thing to do, then the options are still there. It's just for right now, in order to keep the project within budget, that was something that needed to come out. That doesn't mean we can't also bid it on bid day as an alternate, so that we get competitive pricing in the front door if that's the most important alternate to look at. So believe me, we've heard, we know the conundrum we're in with that. So we will continue to look at that. And Doran Whittier is going to continue to try to drive other areas of cost down. So it's, again, as submitted to the MSBA, it's not part of the scope. That doesn't mean it can't be part of the scope of the project ultimately.
Okay.
It's just for right now, it's not included in that budget. But again, that budget includes almost $7 million worth of contingency. So there are opportunities.
What's roughly the additional cost? Is like $1 million to do the field and turf?
It was
More?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, like it was a million.
I always mix up the Cushing demo number with that.
2.7, that whole
2.7
project back
Yeah,
then
it
was
was-
10 million.
Yeah, it was 1.6 or 1.7, I think.
Oh, 1.7.
But again, that's That's an estimate, right? That's not a bid day number. Like, that's the kind of thing where if that's the most important thing, to get an alternate and try to price it, doesn't, and again, if you don't do it as an alternate on bid day, you can still do it as a change order later. It's all, there
No,
are
that's,
options.
I understand. I guess my issue is that people are gonna say, putting grass back, they don't remember what happened with Cushing. That's what I remember. So I'm just afraid if most likely we do go with grass, we plant the grass, and then in the next year it's dead. That's my concern. And the only additional comment I would say on that is I know that, I believe, some sort of waiver that the baseball, they just put in a new baseball field at Central, and there was some discussion about watering that to some degree. I don't think they added irrigation, but they were allowed to do some sort of watering to get the grass to grow. I'm not sure exactly the outcome, but I would just, again, my concern is simply that we're gonna do grass, which is great, I have no issue with it, but what's gonna become of that if we can't irrigate it? That's what my concern, but I actually understand, I agree with your process, and just wanna make sure that we have a response to that, that's all.
Is Flannery irrigated right now?
There is an irrigation system there.
Right, so we were gonna
So-
look into if it could be
It'll be
removed.
grandfathered.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and that would be part of our next steps.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I guess I don't understand how it all works over there.
Irrigation.
that doesn't really,
It's always
it's so
like-
wet down there.
Yeah.
It's so wet
Well,
down
that, and
there.
in the summer, it's typically, there's more water bans, and you can't use it, so I've never seen it on.
Yeah,
So that's that, but I think just to reiterate your question, because it has been talked about to the school building committee, we're kind of striking that balance between coming in fiscally responsible, and I told these guys, and I'm talking to John, keep it under the 120.
Yeah.
Not go over 120, so that was one of the ways we got under there. And then with community feedback like yours and other community members, people say, okay, we're willing to do that, and they give that feedback to the building committee. Like these guys said, there's multiple avenues afterwards to do that, so it's not, it's not a no right now, it's just, okay, we're coming in at the number where we have it. And I think, like these guys say, and as I'm learning with contingencies, if we don't spend all that money, we give it back to the town, that's another opportunity. So there's several opportunities, I think, to build that back in, because I do agree with you that for all intents and purposes, that could be a dirt field within a year.
And there's 13 months worth of design left, right? So and the site is one of those things that there's still a lot to be done. A lot of the whole thing, we're probably at, from 0 to 100, we're probably at 25% design right now, plus or minus. So plenty of opportunity to answer the question about, is there a grandfathered sprinkler system? Can we move it over? We will continue to look at those things as time goes on.
that makes sense. And then I've asked this before, just because this is my business, is the interest rates. I know this is conservative, but it's probably a question for Nancy, but the borrowing doesn't begin until we actually technically need the funds. So once we get the building started and the contracts need to get paid, that's when we borrow. Is that essentially the timing of that?
She had prepared a slide that showed that impact not hitting for a few years.
I'm just curious,
So I think
relative
you're
to the interest rate. I recognize that we need to be conservative, but I was just curious, like in terms of kind of predicting that, if it was 2 years away from borrowing or a year. I think it's a year and a half or two. I know I've asked it before.
Yeah, because
Nancy said 27, likely the first amount of borrowing.
Okay.
Still think it's super conservative.
It's so hard to predict out 3 years. If we were gonna borrow in 6 months, I'd say it would be 3.25, but there's no way we can predict out 3 years.
That's why I think it's better off coming in
Yeah,
conservative.
and it's not that much of it. I mean, it is a difference, but it's not a significant difference.
it's also important to
Right.
remember too, that the construction numbers that we're carrying are also slightly conservative.
Right.
We don't show you the number we think is going to be the bid number. We're trying to show you the number that's in the middle of the pack. 7 bids, this is number 4. So something in there so that we've got a little bit of cushion, right? Our goal is to be happy on bid day, to not have to go and use any contingency, to hopefully have some bid savings. Then if you have bid savings on bid day, suddenly some of these other things like turfing the field, suddenly it becomes very real very quickly. But again, that's just like you said with interest rates, we've watched escalation kind of level. It's never gonna go negative, but at least it's normalized. So at least seems predictable now. So famous last words, but
All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
Anyone else?
Does Maria have a question?
All right, thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Rab, Business Finance Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, I got a message to unmute.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, sharing my screen, I would just draw your attention to a memo in your packets about the Student Opportunity Act and what we need to file in that regard. Is that better now?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome, thank you. So while I'm sharing my screen, I just draw your attention to a memo about the Student Opportunity Act in your file, and I had just put one slide together to help us out a little bit. So the Student Opportunity Act, I think as the committee is aware, was a legislation passed 3 or 4 years ago to increase Chapter 70 funding for schools. And for most communities with a low income population or a higher EL population, they saw a significant increase in funding. Scituate may have seen a small increase in funding 2 or 3 years ago, but this year, going into FY25, Scituate is only receiving the $30 per student that many other towns with similar socioeconomic status is receiving. So we did receive an additional $80,000 in our Chapter 70 funding, and we're certainly grateful for that, and it was incorporated into our FY25 funding. But we are expected to produce for the Department of Education, as a result of the law, a 3-year plan for improvement using Student Opportunity Act funding. We're not getting any Student Opportunity Act funding, so it's difficult. So last week I was at a MASBO meeting, and because it was all business managers, we asked, how are we expected to do this? And basically the response was, we just want to see what are you doing for district improvement? How have you identified the needs in the district, and what are you doing for district improvement? And so then that became relatively easy to write, because we have an extraordinary curriculum team working hard, and we've dedicated hundreds of thousands of dollars to our curriculum. So talking to Mrs. Driscoll and Mr. Burkhead, we took our 3 main curriculum initiatives, and they are basically the adoption of our new math curriculum. I think that hits everybody, 6 through 12 certainly, and like Mrs. Driscoll said at an earlier meeting, we're looking to use additional curriculum funds, K to 5 in math as well. We're narrowed down to a pilot we hope to implement over the summer. We're just going to begin next year a 5-year implementation of Universal Design for Learning, which is an individualized student approach. And next year we'll be in year 3 of the MTSS initiative from the Rennie Center. So taken together, that's in excess of $500,000 of curriculum funding that we've dedicated toward improving students. So we'd like to submit the plan using those 3 main categories, and I'm looking for your endorsement this evening.
Questions, comments? Take a motion? Anyone?
I make a motion that the school committee approve the Student Opportunity Act plan as presented.
Second, all right. Do a roll call vote. Gates,
Yes.
Limblom,
Yes.
Barkowski,
Yes.
Fenwick,
Yes.
Randallini, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not for public.
All right. Special education report with Dr. Bover.
Good evening. Is this on? I'm gonna try to share the screen, I guess. Are you allowing me to?
You should be able to share if you're a co-host.
Wilbur, you can share your screen. You go right ahead.
Oops,
But we're just gonna
mute
unmute.
that
There, you
again.
got it.
Okay.
Ever unmute that.
Don't ever, got it. Sorry for everyone out there. Okay. Okay, there we go. Not sharing it. Is it not? Oh, look. Sharing window.
You have a different one up?
Weird.
It says stop sharing or hide.
We all see
No,
different
this,
pages.
I brought this.
Oh,
up
yours is
myself.
like, I was like,
We see that.
whoa, what's happening?
You-
Yeah, I
you
can
do
see
see
it.
it?
Just not on the
Yes.
first page, it's on like the third page.
I know, but she has the
It's
slide.
different on this
Yeah,
one. Let me
it's
just see what
weird.
happens.
Stop share, stop.
Stop sharing and share again. Right?
Now share screens.
Yeah, fix it.
Yeah.
You look it up at back.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yours is on
Maybe,
another. All all of us have different pages.
Too many
Was
tabs.
that the slideshow?
But should I do that now? Then
Yeah.
I'll put it
Privacy, yeah,
back?
our privacy
Right.
screens were
Or
very
escape
shady.
out.
Privacy
Come to
screen.
that,
Oh, yeah.
slide.
This is my work
one. Escape. Escape.
Really
This one?
Yeah,
This has gotta be straight on.
Oh, put your
Pretty
back
much,
down.
yeah.
Minimize this.
it is kind of dark though.
Should I just try this?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Even on the straight ahead though, I'm kind of like, okay, it'll be a little bit.
Yeah. Share. Sorry, everyone. Window?
Okay.
That one? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rapp.
There
Okay,
we go.
hopefully it'll work.
There we
in a
go.
second. Okay.
That was
All
weird.
right,
I don't know.
yay. All right, thank you. Sorry about the, it's still doing it though.
Try to go from this, just do it.
All right. Let's see.
Advance, no.
Mm-mm.
It's got two different things showing up.
That was weird.
Yeah,
Escape back.
Can you share it from the,
Oh, it says,
can you share it?
I
what if I hide?
share from backup, maybe?
Yeah.
Probably.
I mean, I can go based on that, but then,
Do you want, I can
right,
share
I
it,
know. Do you want to share it?
Should be able to.
so,
Anyone else can.
yeah.
Actually, I'm not on it.
There we go. Now you do it.
No,
No.
Can
but
you go?
do we want me to just do it this
Do it
way?
this way, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. All right. Best laid plans. All right, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak about special education in the Scituate Public Schools. I'm going to talk about our special education students, some statistics relating to their disabilities. We'll talk about in-district and out-of-district, talk about funding sources, including our entitlement grants, proportionate share, which is a requirement for one of our entitlement grants, and then circuit breaker. At any time, feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. I do like to start with the students because, of course, students are the most important, and that is why we are all here. So October 1 is a big day in the education field. That's when we count our students, and our funding for grants is related to that the following year. So as of October 1 of 23, we had 514 students on IEPs that are enrolled and attending public schools in Scituate. That represents 18.5% of our student population. It's a pretty good rate. The state rate for students on IEPs is 20%. So we're about a little bit better than the state, I would say, which is a good place to be. And then another big day that we count is in March. So as of this month, we have 547 special ed students. That does include our out-of-district students. It also includes our homeschooled students that are on IEPs, as well as 13 students on IEPs who are placed by their parents in private schools. And these schools can include Inley School, Thayer, Notre Dame Academy, even out of state. So we do have to count all of those students. And that's why that number is significantly different than the October 1 count. But also in special ed, we are constantly evaluating students and sometimes finding more eligible. And so that number kind of fluctuates a little bit throughout the year. Just to contrast that with last year, we had 532 students at this time, and we did have slightly more out of district. We had 33 students out of district at that time. Our out of district student rate has been going down, I would say, fairly consistently, which is a tribute to all the hard work that our staff do in Scituate Public Schools and the programming that we can provide and the collaboration, of course, with families. The out of district state target rate is 6.4%, and we're about 6%. So again, a good place to be, but it's really important to provide the services within the district in order to be able to manage that. Okay. So if we look at students with disabilities, in order to qualify for an IEP, they have to fit into a certain category, even though we do recognize that all students are unique and different, and even within one disability category such as autism, no two students are alike. But having said that, most of the students that are on IEPs that are attending in-district programs, and most of them are also in full inclusion programs in general education classrooms, most of them have a disability category of a specific learning disability, often dyslexia, sometimes dyscalculia or dysgraphia. And then that is followed by health category, which is a little bit high in Scituate, but important to note that health disability includes students with attention deficit disorder. And then following that, we have developmental delay, which may or may not be a disability. It could just be a delay, meaning the student has some lagging skills in maybe the area of motor skills, communication, social skills, and that student may catch up to their peers. It's only reserved for students up to age 9. So at age 9, then they either no longer qualify for an IEP, hopefully they've made the progress, and maybe don't need an IEP, or there needs to be another determination. So we have about almost 16% in that area, and that would include a lot of our kids in the preschool. And then we also have 9% of students with a communication disability. Our out-of-district students tend to have more severe disabilities, or their disabilities impact them in a way that makes it very difficult for them to experience success within a public school district. And so you can see here, the lighter green color represents autism. So 41% have a disability of autism, and then almost 28% a disability of an emotional disability. Any questions? Sure.
Could you give us some examples of the emotional disabilities?
In order to qualify for an emotional disability, there's like 3 prongs that the student needs to fit. It has to be an unusual response or behavior over a long period of time, difficulty maintaining, initiating, sustaining relationships, and then either a fear such as, prolonged anxiety, depression, thought disorder, somatic concerns, those kind of things. So, it's not uncommon for, kids to have anxiety, but it has to get to a certain degree where they are really having difficulty to learn because of that anxiety or because of their depression. And sometimes kids that just need some accommodations, or maybe they need extended time, they may be able to go on a 504 plan, and with accommodations can be successful. But we're not really diagnosing per se, but we would take in anything from doctors, but we do rating scales and things like that and look at what would be standard and not standard. And the other piece is that it has to be kind of unusual responses in a typical situation, so it's not about like grieving because of the loss of a parent, because you would expect there would be a response to that. But it's behaviors and feelings. It's not just behavior, it's not just oppositional behaviors. So typically could be treated medically, but of course that's parents' choice. So, and it's not unusual for this to be increased during middle school and high school years, whereas in elementary years, it doesn't rise to that level.
So it's like something like anxiety or depression that becomes disabling.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
That's a high percentage.
Yeah, because 33% of us could be qualified as having an anxiety disorder at one point in our life. And so I think we can all relate to having anxiety, but this is, like you said, disabling. So very hard to do.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So just a quick
Yeah.
question, for the March 24th population, you have 29 out of district and 3 pending. Are those, I know you can't get specific, but are those new cases where they're going to be transitioning to out of district where they're currently in, or are they coming in from other districts, or kind of a combination?
So it changes all the time. So when I wrote this, it was 3 pending that the team decided that the student needed an out of district program. But then today I found out 2 students out of district will no longer be our out of district. So
The net.
so that
So 3 might be going out, 2 might be coming back, something like that.
exactly, it's always changing, like if a student moves or, a student comes back to the district.
Okay.
So I just found out about 2 today. So we do our best to project.
Yeah.
And we try to keep kids within the least restrictive environment where they can be successful and work with the teams, and then, and sometimes we can, and that's okay. That's why there are, other programs for students.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. You said in one of the first slides that in 2024, our ratio or proportion was 18.5% compared to the state, it's 20.2, and you said that's good. And so I'm just wondering, how should I be thinking about those 2 numbers? Because I feel like a student that presents with this is just going to present with this. So I'm just wondering, what is that, what does that indicate for you that we're below the state? Like, what is that? I'm trying to make sense of why we care that we're below the state, right?
Yeah, because when we identify a student as needing an IEP, so number 1, they have to have a disability, and number 2, they have to not be making effective progress because of the disability, and then number 3, they need specially designed instruction. So I do feel that our best, prevention, if you will, or being proactive is general education. So if a student is able to be successful in general education, even though that student has a disability, then I think that's good. So I guess that's how I look at it. Just sometimes, districts look at eligibility a little bit differently. But if you think about like how many people in the world would get Social Security disability, or not in the world, but let's just say Massachusetts, it's probably not 18%, right? So it's sort of similar, but we have a little bit more leeway to make sure that kids are getting the services they need to help them to make progress.
So let me ask maybe a different question, just so I can, it's only just so I can understand this, to unpack it. So if our number was higher than the state, what would you be worried about?
I'd be worried that we need to work on our tier 1 instruction and to do tier 3.
Okay.
Because we want to do all that we can before we get to that point. And I think, in Scituate, we're doing a pretty good job there. Case in point, if we're not doing phonetic reading instruction, and, kindergarten through 3rd, 4th grade, some students are going to learn how to read without that, but some might not. And then they would, possibly be diagnosed with dyslexia.
Thank you.
Sure. So then, just want to talk a little bit about funding. So we're grateful for town funding, taxpayer support. We do get funding from the state. Another source of funding is from our grants. So our big grants are our entitlement grants. They're Basically, we are entitled to get as long as we fill out the grants correctly. And we have the 240 and 262, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And then we can also apply for other grants. We are lucky to have Julie Ward is our special services person who writes a lot of grants. We just found out again today that we got a supplemental grant for special education for MECLA students. So we're getting $2,962, I believe. She said that there was people asked for $1 million. They only had $368,000 to pass out for the state. We got a little piece of that, so that's good. So it's really nice that we can all work together on that. She's very good at looking at other kind of grants. The other source of funding is circuit breaker reimbursement. I'll talk about that towards the end, and that is from the state. And then I believe at one of the school committee meetings, somebody was asking about, hey, we should charge tuition for specialized programs, because we are very lucky. We have great staff, we have great programs, and guess what? We do. So we've had 8 students that have attended our programs within the middle school or high school, and their districts have paid tuition here, and that's raised a little bit over $324,000. And that has gone to their, pay for the staff and supplies for the programs. So that's nice. We do try to, our programs are for our Scituate residents, but if we can also, if we have space and it's a good match, then happy to do that. Of course, we have a lot of needs. We have salaries, that's a big source of need. And then out of district tuitions, transportation, as well as some contracted services like teacher of the visually impaired, teacher of the deaf, because we don't have those people on staff, supplies, training, et cetera. And I'll talk about the proportionate share later, but that's sort of like, even though we have this big grant, the entitlement grant, we do have to reserve a proportion of that for students that attend the Inley School. But this year for Grant 240, we got a little bit over $744,000. We used most of that grant for our out-of-district tuitions, our transportation, and then we also were able to fund salaries for 3 paraprofessionals, partial salaries for some of our therapists, and then we used it for contracted services for the physical therapists at the EEC, and then also funding through proportionate share a teacher who is teaching reading at the Inley School. The other entitlement grant is the 262, which is early childhood for kids from ages 3 to 5, and it's smaller. We use that for partial salary of a paraprofessional and for supplies for a preschool program. And then the state authorizes this grant 274 periodically. It's always for training. This year it's targeted for our new IP, which we will be rolling out beginning of next year. So we will be able to provide training and help fund for teachers, special teachers who want to start rewriting their IPs using the new format.
I have a question.
Sure.
Too. So in terms of IP meetings and structure, does Scituate have sort of like a standardized protocol in terms of who is part of that team at each school, or is it different by grade, or I should say building, not grade, but?
So there's state requirements in terms of the team member composition. You have to have the parents there. You have to have a student age 14 or over at least invited. And then usually the special ed teacher, general ed teacher is also required. And then it varies in terms of, is the student getting speech therapy? You'd want this, the speech and language pathologist there. That we do have team chairs, but they are spread out amongst schools. So they run the initial or the reevaluation meetings and sometimes additional assessment meetings. But the other meetings are run by usually the special ed teacher. I think it's consistent from school to school, just depends on the student's needs.
So the makeup could change depending on the individual.
Yes, and parents always have the right to invite whomever they want. All right, so proportionate share. So this, I talked about this last time, but I'm bringing it up again because this is in the summer, when I write the grant, I have to count the number of students that are not only in Scituate, but also students that are attending Inley School from other districts. And so for this year, we had 23 students, and at that point, we had 493 on an IEP. So we calculated to determine the percentage of the students attending Inley School or homeschooled in Scituate. And then they get that proportion of the grant. So that equated to 33,000. So we have to set aside that amount of money. That was a lot more this year because last year I didn't have to account for students from other districts attending Inley. And so that's why I'm funding this special, which she's a reading teacher. She was already hired by parents and she's there. And we're also funding some, therapists and things if the families want to bring their kids to the school, but that's hard when they're in the school. We're not allowed to fund evaluations, but we are allowed to fund supplies. So we've also bought a lot of supplies over the years for specialized supplies for their students on IEPs. Okay. That's proportionate share. So that comes right off the top out of our big grant. And then circuit breaker reimbursement. So I think I explained this last year. It's, I'm not an electrician, but basically it's the premise, which is if you are all of a sudden overloaded, and in this case, like special education expenses, if any one year it's very expensive, there's a way to kind of like, all right, we're just gonna like have this protection so we're not overloading the system. That's why they call it circuit breaker. But it's based on, off the top, they take the foundation amount and multiply that by 4. So this year, 4 times the foundation amount, which is what they would expect a district would pay for any student, not on an IP, but just the cost of educating a student. So this year, that was $51,521. That's 4 times the foundation amount. And then you take that off the top. So for this example, if the tuition costs $100,000, after the 4 times the foundation, that would be $48,479 remaining. And then any year, it could range from like 69% to 75% of the remainder that we could then be reimbursed for. You can also claim for in-district services, but that's for students getting a lot of services. And if they're eligible, you can claim for transportation. So basically, a lot of the students, we're claiming for the tuition. And when we do that, I do it based on like the end of this year. We get word next year, and then we typically don't spend it to the following year. And that way, Dr. Rab knows how much money we're going to be getting from circuit breaker. And Dr. Rab, credit him for this lovely chart. You can see the amount. It's all also on the DESE website, but not in this lovely chart that he created. But so last year which we were receiving this year, but we're going to save it for next year. We got $1,957,148. They did add transportation into the mix a few years ago. So last year when I did it, they only are reimbursing us 59% for the transportation. I don't know what they will do. It depends how much money they have. I don't expect the number for next year to be bigger than this. It might be less, and that's probably because there's less students attending out of district. I do want to thank everyone for their support, and definitely takes a village. And like I said, I feel that we're very lucky in Scituate with all the support of the community, as well as our very experienced and qualified staff and administrators and parents.
One more question. Sure. Sort of a follow-up to Nicole's. I wasn't sure if I should jump in or just wait till the end, so I waited, so I'm sorry. So when Nicole asked about the process, you mentioned that, I think I understood you, that the special education, like the chairperson or the team lead, I'm not sure what the right title is, that they're dispersed across the district. So does that mean the elementary schools, do they have 1, 2, like can you give us a sense of like
The
who
team
is in?
chair?
Yeah, so
Okay,
like the
so
team.
we have one team chair for elementary,
Okay,
so she's across 4 schools.
okay,
And we have one for middle school and high school.
okay,
And then there's also the early childhood coordinator, so she does the preschool.
okay.
She's part-time.
And in terms of, just again, curiosity for thinking about next year's budget and staffing, is there, when you think about dispersing someone across 4 elementary schools, is there like a ratio you're thinking about in terms of this person's ability to sort of manage? It just sounds like a lot to a layperson, so I'm just trying to get a sense of like what feels like a good workload for that person, for example.
Well, right now I know that everyone's pretty busy because
Yeah.
it's also like the sort of the anniversary of having coming back from the pandemic.
Okay,
And so we reevaluate students on IEPs every 3 years.
okay.
So now we're like, 3 years ago
Just
was
like a
the,
peak
this,
time.
the winter of 21,
Mhm.
spring of 21. So it just depends. And sometimes there's a lot of evals happening at once and sometimes not so much. So these team chairs, they are running the evaluation meetings only. They're not running the annual reviews.
Okay,
And then the teachers or the special ed teachers or the liaison are running those IEP meetings that might happen, that have to happen every year, or an amendment meeting.
Okay.
So I think right now it's manageable. I mean, again, if we had a higher percentage of students
Yeah.
with disabilities, that would also then increase the workload, but I feel like right now it's probably good.
okay. I very much appreciate this presentation. I think we've been asking Bill for more information, which has been great. I think what I'm hearing from some parents, and it's not a criticism, it's just sort of a wondering is, I think if there was any way to sort of make sure that parents, especially in elementary school, know who these folks are, because like I feel like we get to see you all the time, which is amazing because you have so much valuable information. But just making sure that when a parent is going through this process, I just hear from parents that they're nervous about it being a process. They don't know what to be asking. And then it's like, especially if the person isn't at their school, then it feels like a whole new person coming in. And so maybe just thinking about like, what does it look like to, just make it more known to folks that these folks are here and this is the process. And I know that again, from hearing from parents that it's mostly working with your home, team, which is amazing. But just anytime you have to communicate outside of your sort of ecosystem.
Right.
So I don't know, just something for you to think about. Like, is there a way to make sure that folks know who these, because if you ask me right now who the special education chair people are in the district, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And I feel like that's shame on me for not being able to say that. So
I mean, maybe that's something we could look at putting on maybe on the website.
Yeah.
Or we also have a special ed parent advisory committee that I do personally like email all the parents that have kids on IEPs. And there are parents that they could also go to, like if they wanted, sort of like, oh, I'm having this IEP meeting, what do I do? But yeah, and then a lot of parents will just contact me. I want an evaluation for my child. I'll be like, okay, what grade? All right, this is who you need. I've CC'd this person. She will help you, and then they reach out to them. But they can always start with their principal too.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think, I think the wonderful thing about this community is that once you're in it, there's so many supports, right? It's just sort of that transition period for parents. I mean, if you're lucky enough to know a parent who's been through it, then you can reach out. But if you don't, or if you're new to the district, I'm just saying maybe making it more visible for folks
Yeah.
would take maybe some emails off of your plate, right? If it was right on the website or something. But again, and it could be as simple as just making, if there were parents who were willing to be like ambassadors of some sort, I just think that's all.
I think our special ed parent advisory committee co-chairs are more than willing to, but I always like get their permission. Hey, is it
of
okay
course.
if this parent emails you, share your email? But we can certainly work on that.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question, might be a Dr. Rav question. Can you comment on how the foundation budget has increased or decreased or stayed the same over the last couple of years? I'm guessing it's probably about the same.
Go.
Foundation.
Goes up every year, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
The foundation budget increases slightly every year. So about 7 or 8 years ago, 4 times the foundation budget was about 41,000.
In Scituate.
No, that's universal,
Everywhere.
so statewide, so
Got
the
it.
$51,000 number,
Okay.
that's
So it's the
every
same
single
for every
committee.
district?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just want to check in from Maria.
Yeah, I would love to ask a question. I was just thinking, earlier you had mentioned how obviously within the bigger bubble of SPED, there are a lot of differences in what we might expect in terms of kids, growth and progress and what that looks like. But I was just curious if you can help give some sort of headlines about that subgroup, about the special ed subgroup and their progress and growth within our classrooms. I feel like I'm not sure where to look. I know I can look at the MCAS, they call that out as a subgroup, but I'm not really sure where else to look or what else to think about when trying to think about, are our kids in special ed, making the kind of progress that we want from them. So I was just wondering if you could just give a little thoughts to that.
That is a difficult question. I think that certainly we can compare our MCAS scores to other districts. But it's just important to note that the student is on an IEP because honestly, they're struggling with testing. Like they're tested and found to have this weakness and et cetera. And so, by nature of still being on the IEP, then they're not probably going to do as well as a student not on an IEP on an MCAS test. Students are assessed for progress as frequently as their grade level peers. So I believe elementary is 3 times a year, high school is 4 times a year. So the family gets a progress report on how those students are doing on their goals. And, they might use some kind of formal assessments, but typically more informal assessments. I think the biggest predictor really, or, biggest indicator is just like how are students doing after they leave the school, or are they able to get off that IEP and succeed? I mean, I've heard really wonderful stories of, students with dyslexia and they're, went to nursing school and, fully employed, or kids with more severe disabilities, but maybe they're, employed in a different kind of a setting. But that is hard to measure that progress, and because every student's so unique, it just really depends on the student.
Do you keep track at the district level of the number of students who sort of are able to move out of their IEP while they're still in Scituate public schools?
The team chairs are usually keeping that information, so I could certainly, get that for you. I think sometimes it's hard for families to kind of let go of it because it can be that kind of safety net and that support. I did attend a meeting the other day and the student was absolutely brilliant, going to college and fluent in many languages, self-taught, unbelievably brilliant. And I think, didn't need the special ed, but sometimes, families are a little bit concerned, what's gonna happen in college. And so, the team explained, well, you don't get the IEP in college and that's okay. There's still a 504 plan if that is necessary. But I think that, that can be sometimes hard for families to kind of let go of because of all the support that can be provided under an IEP. But we can certainly get that. And I do think, the pandemic has, caused a little bit of learning loss, and isolation in some cases for some families. So we're still kind of coming out of that.
Thank you. I just had one more question. I was curious about the intersection between the special ed department and general ed classroom teachers. And I was wondering if, I don't know if this would fall under your department. I'm sure this kind of falls under PD, but maybe you contribute. But I'm just thinking about how are general ed teachers supported in also identifying different learning needs of kids and supporting them within the gen ed classroom, maybe before they are officially on an IEP or after they have one, because a lot of kids are still spending a lot of time in the general ed classroom. So I was just
Yes.
curious if you could speak about that.
Yeah, so we provide training in, around special education issues or accommodations. We have opportunities for collaboration and consultation with, between the special ed provider and the general ed teacher. There's, at the middle school and high school particularly, there's often co-taught classes, so the special ed teacher and the general ed teacher are teaching together. And we have that to a lesser degree in the elementary school, but there's always, time, not always time, but we try to make time for that consultation and problem solving, troubleshooting, et cetera. And I think the schools do a good job with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we are postponing our MECO report for this evening until a later date to be determined. So therefore, we have some minutes to approve from March 11th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 11th, 2024 school committee meeting.
Second.
Okay. Gates,
Yes.
Lindblom,
Yes.
Markowski,
Yes.
Fenwick,
Yes.
Brandolini, yes. Okay, warrants.
We're good.
We are good for tonight. Any correspondences? None that I know of, but any other business, future agenda items?
So, is it on? Is it on? There we go. In the student report, they mentioned that the high school did a survey to see how they were doing. I'm assuming at some point maybe that'll come to us so we can hear some of what the students shared with the leadership. That'd be cool to hear. Yeah.
Just double checking the calendar, Mr. Gates was pointing out. I think. What else we have? Yeah, you're right. So our next, so our next school committee meeting is town meeting, April 8th.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And then isn't the 29th? Just see if we have any of our own actual meetings.
Right. No April vacation, and so you're right. That's correct. Next,
Regular meeting?
Yeah, we don't really have a regular
is
meeting.
May 6th.
Because we would have town
Unless I
meeting and
missed
then
one.
we'd have the
Official
school,
Right.
the school vote.
Vacation.
Wait.
Enjoy
There's no
your
freedom.
freedom.
I don't think
I think we've typically had one in April because of vacation and town meeting, because of the special town meeting, we've used the other meeting. But what we've done in both those cases, if there's any high priority agenda items the committee would like to see, we meet here briefly and do one or two items and then go into
Yeah,
town meeting.
that's
So
Yeah, true.
we do have that flexibility. If you all want to do that, let me know. We can certainly.
Well, we have
Yeah, so I mean, if we don't, we don't. But it does allow for that flexibility in case we have something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. We'll discuss.
All right. Anything else before we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn at 7:30.
Second.
All right. Gates,
Yes.
Lindblom,
Yes.
Markowski,
Yes.
Fenwick,
Yes.
Brandolini, yes.